I'll admit, the thing that first caught my attention with Demon Turf was simply the concept of a 2D character in a 3D platforming environment. But as I got into the game, I quickly realized there was a lot more to it than just a visual gimmick. Meet Beebs, a 2D girl in a 3D world. She's a young demon of only about 1,000 years old, and her goal is to overthrow the Demon King who currently rules over all the turfs of the underworld.
This'll be fun to watch!
In order to do that, she'll need to collect 50 batteries to open the gate to his castle. That's right, instead of golden stars or puzzle pieces, the main collectible in this game is giant, definitely not Duracell, batteries. There's the main hub of Beeb's home turf Forktown, which is full of shops, side quests, and a bridge to the other 4 turfs where you'll be collecting the required batteries. These rival turfs include Apaka Desert, Armageddon, New Neo City, and Peak Plateau. There's pretty good environmental variety between the 4 turfs, which helps deepen the game's world, as well as change things up visually as you progress through the game. The gameplay is pretty tight for the most part, which is very important when it comes to 3D platforming. Beebs has a number of acrobatic moves in her repertoire, including an air jump, wall jump, and a spin that lets you glide briefly in the air. Beebs even has a side jump and a triple jump a la Mario 64, which feels like a nice nod to one of the older games that this title was inspired by. Interestingly, you can combine the glide and air jump to extend your range, which is different depending on which order you perform the moves. If you air jump and then glide, you'll find yourself slowly floating down, which can help you aim for platforms beneath you. If you glide into the air jump, however, you'll do a quick leaping bounce that maximizes your horizontal range, but forces you to stick your landing more immediately. This feels a bit similar to the hat leaping trick from Mario Odyssey, but with a slightly different spin to it. While the gameplay works well, it may take players a little while to get the hang of it at first, since controlling a 2D character in a 3D environment is just going to feel inherently different than what you're probably used to. But as you master the controls, you'll be able to zip and bounce around levels in that liberating way that is the telltale sign of a really good 3D platformer. Also, Beebs uses pretty much the exact same words I do when whiffing a jump in a video game, which means I can really connect with the character. Really? Come on. Each level in the game has the same main objective of reaching the end portal to acquire a battery, with several different types of obstacles along the way. You have your obligatory platforming challenges, which has you getting from one part of the level to another, but sometimes that isn't always enough to progress. Occasionally you'll run into other challenges such as underwater portions where you'll need to collect a number of keys, and these mini arenas where you'll have to take out all the enemies in a specific area before you can move on. These usually involve cute animals like little piggies or crabs, which make you feel really bad to kill. The combat in this game works different than you might expect. Beebs has these palm projectiles that you can either shoot rapidly or charge up for one big blast, but they don't really deal damage. In fact, neither the base enemies nor Beebs herself have health bars. Instead, you're tasked with either knocking the enemies off into pits or into lethal hazards. Pay attention to the colors used in the game, as they each indicate a different type of effect when touched. The most common being blue, which knocks you back, and red, which will kill you or enemies instantly. Oh, and keep in mind the enemies are going to be trying to take you out with the same exact method. It's almost like an intense game of bumper cars. Or maybe the bullies from Mario 64. I'll admit, while the battle system may be divisive for some people, I personally enjoyed it, especially when I figured out my own strategies for taking out the enemies effectively. Every level also has a sub-objective of finding 3 cakes hidden around the path to the exit. What does Beebs want with cake exactly? Well, besides being delicious, you're able to spend the acquired cakes on additional power-ups called mods, which can greatly enhance Beebs' arsenal of moves. These can be basic stat upgrades, such as making Beebs slightly faster or fall a bit more slowly, or they can be much more dynamic changes, such as giving Beebs an additional air jump, or making the spin move float her up slightly on startup. Each mod takes up a certain amount of available equip space. Luckily, you get to test the new abilities out before buying them to see which ones best fit your playstyle. I personally think the Updraft mod is a real game changer, as it saved me from many a plummet. On the other hand, I don't think the additional double jump mod is all that great. Sounds good in theory, but there's quite a delay before you're able to get your second jump off, and it can't even be synergized with the special bounce jump. The 4 rival turfs you'll be visiting all have 7 levels and a boss fight. You must complete every single level in a turf in order to face the boss, which will then unlock the next turf. Overall, I found the bosses enjoyable, but I do have some mixed feelings on how they're utilized in game. Let me explain. So before every boss fight, we're actually given a special tool which is permanently added to our inventory for the rest of the game. This is awesome as it opens up more types of platforming challenges, while also giving us more ways to traverse levels in general. These tools include a hook shot that lets you shoot up certain targets, a snake roller mode that lets you zoom forward very quickly like a rocket, and a bird mode that lets you glide across distances much too far for your regular jumps. This stuff all sounds awesome, right? And it is. So what's the problem? Well, my issue comes from the fact that you're introduced to these tools immediately before the boss fights, and then are tasked with using that brand new tool to take down said boss. In some games this may not be much of an issue, but the bosses in this game tend to be quite challenging, requiring you to have full mastery over the tools in order to beat them. Sure, you get a brief tutorial on how to use them before facing off against the boss, but it isn't nearly enough time for you to really get comfortable with each tool. For instance, you aren't able to shoot the hook shot after using your double jump or hover, even though that's something that you'd instinctively find yourself doing between hook shot targets. You also have to make sure that the targets are clearly visible on screen or you won't be able to stick to them. Most games would probably have you using a certain tool for a few levels before finally testing your skills with the boss that focuses around it. But with Demon Turf, they've decided to flip that concept upside down. You use the tool first thing against a really tough boss, and then the next world that's unlocked focuses heavily on that new tool that you now have. I applaud them for trying something different with how they introduced game mechanics here, but I don't know if it quite works since the levels that feature the tools rarely if ever reach the difficulty of how you use them during the boss fights. Speaking of game mechanics, the one that probably stands out more than any other in this game is the checkpoint system. Rather than the game having automated checkpoints, you're tasked with placing your own checkpoints manually. There's 1 flag at the start of the level and then 3 more that you'll be able to place wherever you want. But be careful, because once you set them down, you can't pick them up without resetting the whole level. This brings a very interesting dynamic to the game, which I think is a double-edged sword difficulty-wise. On one hand, you're more in control. You get to place the checkpoints, meaning if there's a part you're having a lot of trouble with, you can use this to your advantage to help your way through. On the other hand, if you're playing a level for the first time, you may not know where the best place is to set the flags, and you may even waste them all far earlier in the level than you intended, forcing you to either cross a long stretch without making a mistake, or restarting the level altogether to replace the flags. Also, if you're dumb like me, you might occasionally forget that there's a manual checkpoint system at all, die 2/3 into a level, and then have to restart from the beginning. Even so, I think the checkpoint system is a really cool idea. Just be cautious where you set those flags. So you may be wondering something. If there's 4 turfs, each turf has 7 levels, and each level has 1 battery, how does that add up to 50, the required amount to enter the final area? Well, the way it works is that after you've completely cleared a turf of all its levels and the boss, the 7 levels are then remixed and are given a makeover to acknowledge the fact that Beebs is now the ruler of that turf. These remixed levels are often arranged completely differently and take advantage of the new tool you now have after beating the boss. Instead of cake, each level now contains 50 lollipops, which can be spent on various things in the main hub, such as alternate colors for Beebs, or a little pet she can wear on her head, in lieu of a hat like most games would have. It's actually a fun idea. And of course, each of these remix levels also contains a brand new battery, bringing the total amount in the game up to 56. The game gives you a number of things to do aside from the main goal of collecting the batteries and becoming Queen of the Underworld. One such thing is photo hunting, where this nice girl, who is totally a demon just like us by the way, gives us hints on pictures she wants us to take around the world, bring the correct ones back, and we'll be rewarded with sweets, along with adding the actual picture we took in the museum. Another thing to keep an eye out for are these cartridges hidden around Forktown. Once discovered, we can visit the arcade and play special challenge levels which seem to all be references to older games. Does this look familiar to anyone? How about this? Or this. Oh, and there's also Demon Soccer Golf, but we don't really talk about that. The game's art and animation is really nice to look at, the 2D characters blending well with the 3D backgrounds. I will say that the general citizens of each turf kind of have a templatey look to them, but the main characters of the game, such as Beebs, her helpful assistant Capo Boy Miji, and her kinda friend, kinda smug and doubtful Lucy, all have really neat designs, as well as the occasional unique NPC that you run into. The music in this game is spot on, feeling both chill and upbeat in all the right places. I think the boss tracks in particular stood out the most for me, as they did a great job tonally matching with the boss that you're currently fighting. One last thing I'd like to bring up is a suggestion regarding the batteries. So as you know, there's 50 batteries needed to reach the final boss, but only 56 batteries total. That means you're having to collect a pretty high percentage of batteries in order to beat the base game, almost 90%. Compare that to most of the 3D Mario games, where the amount you have to collect is closer to about 50%. Now I know there's less levels in Demon Turf, but the game is by no means short. You have to really work for these batteries. Early in the game, it may only take around 5 minutes to reach the end of a level, but you can easily spend up to 20 or even 30 minutes on some of the harder levels. And when you're pushing towards that 50 battery mark, there are only hard levels left. To give the game some credit, they do have a system to counter this, giving you the option to spend cake to skip levels or even entire boss fights that you may find yourself stuck on. While this is a nice option, and I'm sure some people will really appreciate it, I personally don't like the idea of skipping levels. Consider this alternative. If they really want to keep the final boss cap at 50 batteries, why not create more opportunities for earning batteries? Take the 8 arcade challenge levels for instance. While fun to do on their own, they don't actually reward you with anything other than a number saying you've beaten them. Adding batteries as rewards for beating these would already give more options for players struggling to reach the 50 battery mark without paying to skip the levels. Adding more battery earning opportunities should be easy enough, such as getting a battery for every 5 photos you find for the photo hunt, or for every course you beat in Demon Soccer Golf. Overall, I really enjoyed Demon Turf. Cool aesthetics and funky music aside, the game just feels good to play, which is the really important part. Does it have its flaws? Yeah, it does. Oh boy. Oh, I forgot. I had a brain fart there. Alright, but see, now we got that checkpoint. Huh? How'd that happen? Oh! There's the occasional hiccup here and there, and an inconsistent difficulty curve with the bosses, which is likely mostly due to the way the tools are implemented, but none of it is enough to take away from the special shine that this game certainly has. I think if you're really into 3D platformers, especially ones with a hint of retro indie feel to it, then you should definitely check this one out.